Hey Bobby, how are you? It's Miller. I'm happy that we could get together and talk about some swimming. It's interesting that we get to come together and talk about it as two different kind of perspectives. Now that I'm no longer in the sport, for a long time I had a athlete perspective, but now that I have moved into coaching, my perspective on the sport has changed a little bit, and kind of opened my eyes to different areas of the sport. But a quick introduction of myself. My name is Miller. I swam on the Bahamas national swim team for about 8 years. I swam competitively for close to 13. I represented the Bahamas throughout the Caribbean at some pretty fun meets. And that's kind of how I, realized that I enjoyed swimming and that I wanted to do more with it after the athletic side was done. So, what about you, Bobby?
I'm pretty similar. Like, I represented the New Zealand national team since I was 13. I've also competitively been swimming for pretty much 13 years as well. The only difference is that I'm still swimming and I'm on the Queen's University swim team as well. So, yeah.
So, I want to get into a little bit of how we feel that swimming's changed, in the
Yeah.
last 10 years, because from a coaching perspective now, I can say that these changes are really exciting in terms of the fact that, I'm able to do stuff with a 15 or 16-year-old athlete that I was never able to do as a 15 or 16-year-old athlete in terms of, we're tracking water displacement on kids' kicks and
Yeah.
the pounds of force that they're pulling with each arm. If you look at the technology that's put in the swimsuits, the blocks, it's an exciting time to be a coach. So I wanted to hear how those advances were kind of impacting you as an athlete.
Yeah, I definitely agree that the past 10 years has definitely changed in swimming. Like when you look back when we were like 9, 10 years old, you like look at the textbooks back then and how they were down to the knees, and now those type of suits are illegal now. And so the way that the suits have evolved to fit each swimmer's body and how like it effectively like allows you to get through the water. It's just really different, and I think there's a lot more to come out of it in the future as well. Like especially like you said with technology, like there's underwater cameras. Like when I was swimming in New Zealand, we had a analysis lady, and she would come into practice, and she would have these cameras on all these different angles in the pool, and like she would analyze like every single kick, every stroke, like what we needed to work on with our technique. And I think that's really helped from an athlete's perspective on like how to improve their game, really.
So I want you to talk a little bit about how, in this present day, of course, coronavirus has impacted pretty much everyone in one way or another, but it's wreaked havoc on athletes pretty much all over. And I wanted to kind of talk to you about, your perspective on how you stay motivated, or, how coronavirus has impacted your training, or all those things.
Yeah. So like COVID definitely has affected athletes all over the world. Like especially when I came back to New Zealand, we went straight into lockdown, so we couldn't really leave the house unless like you needed to go to the supermarket or for like emergency services. So we didn't really have the opportunity to train, and as a swimmer specifically, you need to be in the pool to train. Like some other sports can kind of do at home kind of thing. So like what I was doing, I was trying to stay fit at home, like being on the bike and doing like hit workouts and stuff like that, so I can still maintain my muscle and like still be fit in a different point of view. It's definitely hard for to be motivated, because even though swimming is a individual sport, so to say. You are there to represent a team or a country, so like you always have people around you like to support you and encourage you. So I think that was probably the hardest, is trying to stay motivated through it all. But I guess like I wonder what the coaching perspective of COVID was for you.
So yeah, it was pretty challenging in the beginning, especially because there was just so much that we didn't know about it. There, the shutdown pretty much took me out of a job for a few months. There weren't any pools open. Nobody was willing to have any private lessons at their houses or anything like that. So I kind of used it as an opportunity to study a little bit more into the sport, into the science of the sport. Just kind of using it as an opportunity because you really didn't have anything else to do as a coach, unfortunately. I know a few athletes were able to keep training in private pools and stuff like that, but for the large part, there were no athletes to coach.
Yeah.
So that was definitely tough. Especially because I felt that I was just getting into a really good rhythm with coaching, and I was just really starting to find my groove with the athletes. And that kind of brings me to the fact that I want to talk a little bit about how the transition from being an athlete to a coach was, because it's still weird for me to even say as a coach or coaching. Because you swim for so many years, you think of yourself as an athlete pretty much forever. All of these great experiences and all this information that I was able to gather about the sport all came from being an athlete and traveling around the Caribbean and the U.S., swimming for the Bahamas. And now that I get to share that information with kids and high schoolers or whatever age, it's a very rewarding feeling, because in the moment when you're training 20, 30 hours a week, there's not a whole lot that's very rewarding about it.
Yeah.
But now that I get to say, okay, I spent all those hours in the pool, learning this stuff, and you kind of get to pass it along to the younger kids, and it's an exciting time.
Yeah, and I think that like your athletes as well have a bit more respect for you because they know that you went through the same things that they did. So I feel like they will really take into consideration what you're really saying to them.
No, absolutely, and I try to tell them that pretty early. It's I'm fresh out of the sport, so I I know how much doing 200 IMs repeat at the end of practice suck. Like, it's not fun. It's just stuff that you have to do. So I was gonna kind of ask you to talk about a little bit, your experience on the national teams. I know you competed at some pretty high level meets, and I want you to talk a little bit about, the difference between swimming for Queens and swimming for your country.
Yeah, well, yeah, like you said, I have experience competing on high levels for New Zealand. I've been to Junior Worlds and World Champs, and I've medaled in a few of those. It was definitely an eye-opening experience doing that because I started at such a young age. I went to my first Junior Worlds when I was 13. At that age, it was quite a lot of pressure. I didn't realize what I was really getting myself into. There was a lot that I learned along the way, especially with dealing with people from Swimming New Zealand, our organisation and all that. Just like dealing with a lot of different people. And, like I said before, it was an individual sport. And I think the difference between swimming in New Zealand and swimming in the States is just the team environment. Like in New Zealand, you were representing your country, but you were really there for yourself. Whereas when I moved to America, I kind of found my love for swimming again, just because I realized that the pressure isn't all on me. We're in this team together, we share the pressure together. And I think that's something that I really loved when I first moved here, because it was just allowed me to be more accepting and be able to recognize, how important a team environment really is.
It's interesting that you said that because I noticed the same things, but I feel differently about them. Coming from the
Yeah,
Bahamas, being on the national team, that high level of pressure, competing at those high level meets, that's kind of what drove me to love the sport. So coming to the US to swim where you're, in less exciting venues and, the crowd, something I want to talk to you about is the crowd, because when you're at a national meet in the Caribbean, I know, for example, they're bringing out drums and bells and whistles and the crowd is drinking and
yeah, they get hype.
yeah, it's a very different environment, than coming and swimming in college and the only cheers that you really hear are the forced cheers that your coach is making your team do.
Yeah,
It's I don't know. I didn't feel like it was as exciting of a race environment. Do you feel
yeah.
the same or like how was it in New Zealand?
I mean, it was like kind of the complete opposite for me. Like in New Zealand, there wasn't really much of a spectator crowd or a fan crowd. The only times we would really get a big group of people coming in and supporting was during our nationals, for the qualification meets for Worlds and Olympics and that kind of competition. That's when people really started to cheer and really started to get involved, like not just from a team like point of view, but everyone in the stands, all the fans were cheering. Whereas like if it's just like a little meet in New Zealand between clubs or like a just an area of teams that compete, like it wasn't, it was just the athletes that were cheering, and even then you were just kind of drained after the meet, like you didn't really feel, oh, it's just another meet kind of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
in the US, we wouldn't get told off, but it would be highly advised to always be on your feet and always cheer for your teammates. Like there was never a quiet moment in the stands or like in the team. So I think that's like what was different about me, is that like New Zealand was kind of more calm and kind of just going through the motions, whereas swim meets in the States is like all high pace, all like cheering around and just supporting everyone.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. That's two very different experiences.
Yeah.
The last thing that I kind of wanted to touch on here was, your experience with drug testing on the national swim team, because I think that this is an element of swimming that, or any, high level athletics, that is not talked about nearly enough, because I can remember my first experience getting told after a race that I was getting drug tested. And, I think a lot of people think that this is just peeing in a cup and, leaving.
Yeah.
Whereas, it is a process.
Yeah, that's not the case.
No, it's a process and a half. And so I remember getting pulled in. Well, actually, they found me as soon as my race was done. And they followed me down to the warm down pool and said, listen, we can't leave your side until, you come up and give us your urine test. And so they hung out with me for an hour and a half until I actually had to go pee. And we walked up. I had to fill out a big slip of paperwork, all the supplements I was on, anything I had eaten in the last 2 days or drank in the last 2 days, anything that could show up that, would raise any flags that, could be explained. Yeah. And then, you have to pick your package. You have to make sure the serial number on it matches the paperwork. And, you have to, I mean, was it the same type of process for you?
Yeah, I definitely agree that it is a very unspoken side of the sport. And especially like these days when you look at any type of sport, really, there's like a lot of doping kind of going around. So I think it is great to do these drug tests. I did my first drug test when I was 13. It was after I qualified for Junior Worlds. And at the time, like, I had, a little understanding about the drug testing process, but I didn't realize, it was the same. They would follow you around. They wouldn't have you out of their eyesight. They had to come to you to the bathroom. They had to watch you pee. And we had to fill out all these forms. And I was the same. It took me like 2 hours to pee because I was so nervous. But they take it really seriously in New Zealand. Like, we were in Slovakia for our training camp before Worlds in 2015. And they got some people from their anti-doping agency in New Zealand. They flew all the way to Slovakia to take some urine samples from us.
Yep.
Some drug testings. And like, another thing that they do is, I don't know if they do this in the Bahamas, but they do like a whereabouts list. So they basically, if you're pretty well up there in your sport, they put you on this whereabouts list, and basically you have to go onto this website and fill in where you are basically 24/7. So they can randomly come and drug test you. So just say you say, I'm at school from 8 a.m. till 3 p.m. or I'm at home at 6 p.m. or whatever, and just say they decide to randomly come to your house at 6 p.m. to randomly drug test you, and you're not there, that's a strike one. And if you get 3 strikes like that, then it's basically, you're out. Like, you get a ban from the sport. I think it's for 2 years. So they really do take it seriously.
I know the whereabouts list well, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I did not have tons of fun filling that out every day, letting people know where I was going to be and updating it anytime I had to travel. That was not fun. But so I think that, we both agree that, the sport's heading in the right direction. And I personally am very excited to see, what new developments come out of it in the next few years, and, what's going to happen, through COVID and everything that's going on right now, and how the sport rebounds. But I know that, swimming is in a very good place right now, and I think that we should have these conversations more often.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Like, we don't know what the future holds, but I do agree that it is going on the right direction. With swimming especially, you don't really get a lot of money in the sport. And I know just the past year or two, they've done created the ISL meet, the International Swimming League. That's finally giving swimmers the opportunity to really get money out of the sport. And I think that will further develop into something big in the future. And I'm excited to be there when it happens.
Well, thank you for taking some time. That was fun.
Yeah, thank you as well, yeah.
So I will be catching up with you later, and we'll see what happens in the sport.
Yeah, I'll be seeing you on campus.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
See you later. Bye.